All right. So I'm going to go ahead and present the speaker for the event. My name is Tony Schiffmeyer. I'm the Vice President of Finance, and the speaker today, as the Associate California Program Director at the Institute for College Access and Success, Laura Zabocz works to eliminate equity gaps and enable all Californians to attend and succeed in college by identifying and addressing college affordability challenges across the state. Along with research, policy analysis, and advocacy, Laura leads Californians for College Affordability, a diverse coalition of 24 organizations united in strengthening need-based financial aid for the state's underserved and underrepresented students. She received her bachelor's in English from Oberlin College and her master's in education policy and management from Harvard Graduate School of Education. With that, I'm happy to present your speaker for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. It is a pleasure to be with all of you. Sorry, sticky fingers on my keyboard. Again, my name is Laura Zabocz. I'm from TICAS, and I've been at my organization now for, 13 years. So I've had the pleasure of working closely with the SSCCC for basically all of those years. I've presented at, I think, almost nearly every General Assembly since I started at the end of 2007. So, I always start by sharing that one of the greatest joys of my job is working with student leaders like you. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to do that today. So just to give you a little bit of background about TICAS, if you're not familiar with us, we are a higher education policy organization that works both in California and nationally on increasing awareness and reducing the burden of student loan debt, on improving access to available aid, and in particular, strengthening need-based grant aid programs. And we also do work around accountability, ensuring that we're protecting students, borrowers, and taxpayers so that students are getting a quality degree and they're not taking on excessive debt burdens. In terms of our focus on financial aid, we see it as a real tool for both access and success in college. So of course, having financial aid available to help cover tuition and fees ensures that students can step foot in the classroom. And as all of you know well, because it's the lives you're living, we still, even if we can set foot in the classroom, need to be able to return day in and day out, have a safe roof over our heads, have nourishing meals, have the books when we need them for our courses. And even though we are living in a shelter-in-place environment right now, we still have many of these same costs, if not double. I know I've heard of some students who have said that they not only are continuing to have to pay their lease on their apartment, but they've moved in with relatives and are helping out there. So it's also very, very critical that we have financial aid available to help pay for the non-tuition costs of going to college. So I wanted to start with just going over some snapshots of college affordability in recent years. I will say that the data that's currently available is pre-COVID. I guess what I would say as a takeaway is that the concerning trends that we've been seeing over the years have only gotten worse. They've only been exacerbated by the COVID-19 and its attendant recession. So what you can see here is this is looking at the total college costs in the East Bay. And I looked at the community college city, CSU, East Bay, and UC Berkeley. And again, some of this data may be familiar to you, but I include it here because when speaking with lawmakers and other stakeholders up in the Capitol, oftentimes they're not familiar with some of the data points that we share, and I think it can be very useful to bring it to their attention. So what you can see here is that while tuition and fees do vary quite substantially across the three public segments, non-tuition costs are much more similar. In fact, I remember speaking with someone once who was a student at Berkeley City. Her roommate was at Cal, and literally they had the exact same expenses except for their tuition and fees. Now, this is what we're looking at here. This is total cost before any grant aid is applied. Now, on the next slide, what we can see here are the net costs. So you may hear about, net prices. And what those are is after available grant aid, what must the student pay out of pocket, whether it be through savings, work, borrowing. And what we can see here is that despite the fact that college costs are the highest at UC Berkeley in this example, it's actually more affordable for a low-income student to attend UC Berkeley than it is to attend the community college, because the amount of grant aid that is available for UC students is higher. And to be clear, not at all saying that UC students shouldn't be getting the grant aid that they're getting. They certainly should. Other research we've done with UCSA and CSSA has shown that there's disproportionate debt burdens on students of color and low-income students. But I do think it's important to see in context here how community colleges have gotten the short end of the stick in terms of financial aid funding over the years. And that's not limited to just the East Bay region. This is a snapshot from our third annual report on what it costs for low-income students across California to what they have to pay out of pocket after available grant aid. What we did was we looked at the 9 undergraduate serving University of California campuses, and we paired them with their nearby CSU and community college campuses. And then we ran the net price calculators, which are calculators on every school's website that allow you information about you, and then it gives you an estimate of what you will likely have to pay. And what we found was that across all 9 regions in the state, the community college was never the most affordable option. This, of course, has significant impacts on some very real equity issues. We know, first of all, we know that working more than 15 to 20 hours a week can be detrimental to student academic success. And in fact, I should point out here that at all 27 colleges in our analysis, for students who are living off campus independently, which the majority of California college students do, at all of them, so at UC, CSU, and community college, students would have to work more than 15 hours a week after grant aid to cover costs, which is not okay. We also then are seeing how this impacts rates of full-time attendance. Of course, some students do make choices to attend part-time for family and other reasons, but there's also many students who wish they could attend full-time but don't have enough aid and have to work. And at all of the community colleges in our analysis here, the majority of students attend part-time. And so it comes as no surprise that the weekly work hours after grant aid needed to cover college costs range from 24 to 40, which is quite concerning. And then also, there are students in particular at the universities, and I'm sorry, the door just opened to this room. Let me just shut it very quickly, apologies. Okay. Particularly at the CSUs and at the UCs, we are seeing that lower income students and students of color are more likely to borrow. So as an example, we know that while about half of bachelor's degree recipients have taken out student loans, we know that at UC, 2/3 of Black graduates, and at CSU, 3/4 of Black graduates have. So very real equity implications of insufficient financial aid across the segments. But as you can see from this image here, they're most pronounced at the community colleges. And just to talk a little bit more about the equity implications, students from families that make no more than $30,000 in annual income have to spend about half of their income to cover college costs after grant aid. And this affects more than half of Latino students, 3 in 5 Native American students, and almost 2/3 of Black students who come from families that make less than $30,000 a year. For comparison, college costs amount to a little under 1/4 of family income for students in other income groups. Now, this is an image that I've shared many times in the past, and I find it particularly compelling because it really underscores how disproportionately underfunded community college students are. So the first ring is looking at the distribution of college students in California, and you can see that 2/3 attend community college. The second ring is looking at Cal Grant awards. So we can see here that while 2/3 of the state's college students attend a community college, a little under 1/3 of the Cal Grants go to community college students, and you'd expect them to be much more aligned. In fact, I would expect them even to be higher than 65%, because we know that the community colleges also serve most of the state's low-income students. And then the most concerning thing is when you look at the actual dollar amount, and this is because Cal Grant size differs based on where you go to school, and unfortunately the smallest awards go to community college students, only 7% of Cal Grant dollars go to community college students. So that's something that we've long been very concerned about. Let's see, I'm trying to move the slide. Why is it not to move? Ah, I jumped ahead. Okay, so, people will ask, well, what's happening? Why is it that only 7% of the Cal Grant dollars are going to community college students? And what we're looking at right here is the number of annually available competitive Cal Grants compared to the number of eligible applicants in a given year. So for 2019-2020 academic year, there were, close to 350,000 eligible, not just applicants, but eligible applicants in the competitive pool. And I'll explain more about that in a second, for only 41,000 available awards. Now, I do want to pause and say that, thanks to the great work of partners like SSCCC, UCSA, CSSA, our Affordability Coalition, we recently got an increase to the number of competitive grants to 41,000. It used to be less than 26,000. So that was huge, but it also goes to show that how vast the problem is when we still have over 300,000 eligible students every year. The majority of them are attending community colleges who don't get an award simply because there aren't enough. And the Cal Grant program is pretty wonky. It's many different components to it, but I think the most kind of important distinction for what we're talking about today is that there's an entitlement Cal Grant program and a competitive program. So if you meet basic eligibility criteria, meaning your income does not exceed a certain amount, you have a minimum GPA. If you apply by March 2nd, within 1 year of high school graduation, you get a Cal Grant. You are entitled to one. But if you miss the deadline, or say you went to an under-resourced high school and you didn't know about it, or you decide for various reasons you're not going to go straight into college and it's more than a year elapses, you have to compete for a very limited number of competitive Cal Grants. And so that's what we're looking at here, is for those who are, they could even be 19, 20 years old. Some people are of course much older, but more than a year out of high school, and you have a very slim likelihood, even if you're eligible, of getting a Cal Grant. The other issue is with the size of the Access Award, which helps pay for non-tuition college costs. And also because community college students have their tuition and fees waived by the Promise Grant, formerly known as the Board of Governors fee waiver, the only type of community college students receive is the Access Award. So what you can see here is the value of that award over time. And since the program, or since the Access Award came about half a century ago now, the Access Award has dramatically lost value. In fact, it's only worth about a quarter its original value. Now, again, want to say that due to fabulous work by groups such as yours, we have been able to get small increases to the Access Award in recent years. And I think that that's very important. In 1 year, we did get a $150 increase. We also worked to help get legislation passed where there's a college access tax credit, where wealthy Californians can donate some money when they're paying taxes to help increase the size of the Access Award. That's a textbook, that's several meals. But again, we're still thousands of dollars off from where we need to be. So putting in perspective, again, the scope of the problem. I'll also add that there is an additional supplement for Cal Grant recipients at community colleges who attend full-time, and you can make up to an additional $4,000, or you can receive up to an additional $4,000 a year. Unfortunately, fewer than 5% of California community college students qualify, and that's in large, well, the two main reasons. One is because many community college students who are eligible aren't getting a Cal Grant, and unfortunately you can't get the supplement if you don't have the Cal Grant. And then even if you are getting a Cal Grant, you know, for many reasons, students aren't always able to attend full-time, which is what you need to do to get the supplement. So that's another policy issue. So, you know, just to summarize the key structural problems with the current Cal Grant program, you know, it does well in helping recent high school graduates with tuition costs, but not nearly as well with older students and non-tuition costs. And we know that affordability challenges impact student debt, student completion, time to degree, and can contribute to persisting equity gaps. So, you know, I know just the last few slides were really to kind of give you a picture of the current affordability landscape in California, how it's impacting community college students. And now what I want to do is talk about the history of Cal Grant improvement efforts. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides that start with the Great Recession of 2008. And of course, it lasted for several years. The formation of our Affordability Coalition, of which the SSCCC is a original member. I'm very proud to say that. Talking about the work we've done as a coalition, Cal Grant reform writ large, so Cal Grant reform efforts in recent years to really overhaul the program. Then the impact of COVID-19 on those reform efforts, and what's next. This is a picture of our postcard. So as you can see, this is the diverse membership of our Coalition of Californians for College Affordability. Back in 2008, in the aftermath of that recession, there were proposed cuts to the Cal Grant program, and when we ran data analyses on some of those proposals, we found that students of color and low-income students were the ones that were going to be hurting the most from those proposed cuts. And so as an organization, TICAS felt that it was really important to pull together a coalition of student-focused, student-centered organizations to fight to keep the Cal Grant program whole. And we also wanted to make sure that there was a space for organizations where college affordability may not be their primary focus, but for whom it really impacts their constituents. So in addition to the 3 statewide student leadership groups, and I'll also happy to say that the Student Trustee Caucus is a member as well of our coalition. We also have civil rights organizations like the NAACP California and Unidos US. We have business groups like Bay Area Council, LA Area Chamber. We have workforce, other higher education advocacy organizations like the Campaign for College Opportunity and EdTrust West. And all of us are united in strengthening need-based financial aid in California. So, you know, post 2008 recession, the work that we did as a coalition was really focused on sort of 2 main areas. One, it was serving more Cal Grant eligible students. So, you know, you can do that by increasing the number of competitive grants. You can do that by widening the window during which a student is eligible for an entitlement grant. And then also increasing the size of the access award that helps pay for non-tuition costs. And of course, this helps students at all types of colleges, both public and private, and you know, really prioritizes the most under-resourced students. Like I mentioned earlier in this presentation, we were able to get some wins, you know, between, I'd say, 2014 and 2019, we got several wins in terms of increasing number of competitive awards, increasing the size of the access award, the supplemental grant for community college students. Other great wins include undocumented students are now eligible for competitive Cal Grants when they weren't previously. That's an area that we care a lot about as well. So, you know, but then, you know, as we were, you know, making these improvements, we kind of felt like we're making these improvements around the edges, but what can we do to systemically address the structural problems within the Cal Grant program? And actually, sorry, before I get into that part, I do want to say that we have been active with your Fixed Financial Aid campaign. I think the work that you and CSSA and UCSA have done has been terrific. And, you know, I look forward to continuing that work in coming months as well, but just wanted to give a shout out to that great campaign. So to give some history around Cal Grant reform, you know, back in about 2018, 2019, there was growing consensus from many important organizations around a financial aid pledge. LAO, the Legislative Analyst's Office, Community College Chancellor's Office, the Student Aid Commission, the Century Foundation, TICAS, we all thought that a pledge would expect that students would contribute a reasonable amount from work or loans, or a combination of both, that if you're a dependent student, your parents would also pay a reasonable amount based on their ability to pay, and that the rest would be covered by a combination of grants and scholarships from state, federal, and institutional sources. I'm not going to get too much into the detail of what, you know, such a pledge would look like, but I will say that, you know, one area where we have all consolidated, or we've all kind of joined forces around, is if a student worked minimum wage for no more than 15 hours a week for the 39 weeks in the academic year, that's about $7,600. So, you know, we think it's a reasonable goal that a student should not have to pay more than $7,600 out of pocket, and that if they have other resources or they want to borrow, that they could then reduce the workload. But we think that should be like the ceiling. No one should ever have to pay more than about $7,600. So in terms of policymaker interest in reform, the California Student Aid Commission, CSAC, adopted reform principles about 2 years ago. Last year, on both the Assembly and the Senate sides, legislation was introduced to reform state financial aid. The Assembly legislation would have made reforms to the Cal Grant program. The Senate bill would have instituted a pledge-like financial aid program for community college students specifically. Then the state budget last year included some down payments towards greater financial aid investments. So an example of that is the increase from about 26,000 competitive awards to the 41,000. And then when the January budget proposal came out this past January, in there they were looking to CSAC, California Student Aid Commission, for some recommendations on how can we best reform the Cal Grant program. I should also mention that during 2019, we at TICAS ran a Cal Grant reform work group with representation from the SSCCC and other student groups. CSAC also ran a work group towards the end of 2019 and 2020 that TICAS was a part of. And come March, before the pandemic hit, they had a proposal that they were planning to convert into legislation and really try to get reform happening this year. But sadly, the pandemic hit, as we all know, and a recession along with it. And, you know, really any hope for reform has since been put on hold. I want to come back to, after this slide, I'll talk to you about, you know, what we're thinking for reform moving forward. But the reality is that all of a sudden we went from, you know, the state went from a several $billion surplus to, you know, double digits billion deficit. And no longer was it viable to be asking for, you know, a more robust Cal Grant program that would cost upwards of an additional $2 billion. So we at TICAS have shifted strategy over the last several months, thinking about, okay, well, what can we do? Well, first of all, what can we do to protect Cal Grants? And I'm happy to say that in the budget that was passed this summer, Cal Grants did not receive any cuts, which is great. Still very sad that there aren't additional investments, but given the state of affairs right now, it's great that there were no cuts made. We also have been trying to get provisions enacted to protect current students' financial aid. So you may be aware that the CARES Act that was signed by Trump in March includes provisions related to federal student aid and protects Pell Grants. So some examples are, if you have to drop out due to COVID, maybe you're sick, family member's sick, no one's sick, but someone loses their job and you still have yours and you have to take on more hours, whatever it may be. If you have to drop out due to COVID-19, you don't have to pay back your Pell Grant, which you normally would have to. You'd have to give back a refund if you didn't complete the term. Another provision in that act is that it does not count against your lifetime limit. So if you dropped out midterm due to COVID, then it's kind of like a pass. They don't count it against your lifetime limit. And we really want to see similar provisions in place for the Cal Grant program. So you can see here, what we're really trying to push for are not having students have to pay back their Cal Grant. Although to be fair, I will say I haven't heard of any instances of students having to repay their Cal Grants. If you know of anyone that has, it would be great to be connected with them. But it's still always helpful to have things put into law just to be doubly safe. We don't want it to count against lifetime eligibility limits. We want there to be alternative ways of documenting grade point average and satisfactory academic progress, since we know that's challenging right now with remote learning. Interruptions in student enrollment, one change we'd like to see is for there either to be an additional, so for the transfer entitlement Cal Grant, you have to transfer pretty seamlessly from community college to a four-year university. And we'd like to see either an additional year that students can have, like a gap year, and still be eligible, or be able to put their transfer entitlement award on leave of absence for a year. So that's something that we're hoping we can get through. And we've done advocacy also around emergency grant aid. We were really concerned that the federal emergency grant dollars were not able to go to undocumented students, although then of course there was the great court case from your chancellor, and I know there's been a whole bunch of back and forth on that, but very happy to say that in the state budget that was signed this summer, there are additional funds, emergency grant funds specifically for undocumented students, which is great. And we also want to see greater investment in financial aid offices who, they already have high workloads and presumably have even higher ones now that there is a recession. So, there's been so many great, I shouldn't say great, but really informative and helpful surveys that have come out, including from you all, the SSCCC, from Education Trust West, from the California Student Aid Commission, just really illuminating what a toll COVID-19 is taking on our students, and how it's really exacerbating affordability issues that we've been dealing with already for years and years. We really would love to hear from all of you, and we have a platform called Join the Conversation. It's you can see the website down at the bottom of the screen. And, here's a student who submitted a story. Jonathan from California said, "I need to stay up all night to do schoolwork. And even with the whole class online, it was very difficult. I only had my phone for online classes up until just recently when the school provided a laptop. I have no internet at home and libraries are closed. I'm so frustrated and stressed about what I can do. COVID-19 has made it difficult with school and even at home. I'm not sure how much more the school can help with, even as a veteran." So he was formerly in the military. So, just encourage any of you, or if you have friends or colleagues who have stories to share, we would really want to hear them. One of the things that we heard from the Department of Finance earlier this year was that even though, so when we were talking with the Department of Finance about provisions to protect Cal Grants, kind of what we were hearing was, well, we get that's a problem, but we're in triage mode right now, and we really need the story. Like, we need to hear the stories. Like, we need to be able to quantify the problem. We need to know how many students this is impacting. So I think that, our chances of getting those provisions in the budget for 2021 will be greatly improved if we're able to share student stories. So please feel free to share that website widely. I mentioned that I was going to talk about what's next. So my understanding, I don't want to spread incorrect information, but my understanding is that CSAC is revisiting their working group that they had convened at the end of 2019. And as I mentioned, they had a Cal Grant modernization proposal that came out in March, right before COVID. But they're looking at how can we move reform forward? How can we implement structural reforms, even with little to no additional funding? And certainly I think that there are ways that we can do this. But I do want to flag for everyone that, and I just, I'm just thinking, I've been thinking about this a lot in recent months, that whatever reforms may come down the pike, we really have to just make sure that they are targeted to the neediest, most under-resourced, most underserved students. And one of the concerns that I have is that it's a lot easier to cut the access award than it is to cut, say, the tuition award. And I'm by no means advocating to cut the tuition award, but, the access award that pays for non-tuition costs is the award that community college students get. And it's just politically, I think, a lot easier to cut that one down. So I just want to make sure that and I haven't heard that is, it's not that I've heard that that's going to happen, but I just want us all to kind of keep our eye on the ball to make sure that whatever moves forward, we're really protecting our neediest students, the majority of whom are at community colleges. We have, we're going to have a virtual convening in a couple of weeks to talk about these issues. Going to have a student panel, and there's ongoing advocacy efforts that we're engaged in as a coalition. So, if you're interested in partnering with us at TICAS, please shoot me an email. My email's at the end of this presentation. Obviously we're all adapting based on shelter in place, but there's still opportunities, and there will be in the coming months, to give public comment remotely at legislative hearings, doing remote legislative visits. We could, potentially do some co-author op-eds together. A lot of opportunities for that. So the proposed budget for the 2021 year will come out in January. And of course, there's also opportunity for legislation as well. So they're kind of parallel tracks. And the way that I think about it is that any policy that's going to require an investment of dollars needs to be in the budget, because that's really how it gets funded. But it can also be helpful, even if you have a budget ask, it can still be helpful to have a parallel bill that's alongside of it, in terms of raising visibility for the issue. And also there are some ideas that don't really cost anything. And so, for example, there could be a universal net price calculator on CSAC website. And there might be some minimal costs to getting that programmed. But there's also, I'm happy to talk with folks about ideas of what are some lower and no cost ways we can use legislation and administrative actions to improve college affordability. So I already mentioned some of the ways in which we have partnered with students over the years. I'll also mention that we have done reports with, we've co-authored reports with the with this CSSA and UCSA on student debt burdens, and always open and willing to find additional ways to partner. So please keep that in mind. And just to kind of give you a couple of examples of how we've partnered with the SSCCC in recent years. We've done, this is the most recent one, we've worked on resolutions together. So this one was about, college, kind of prioritizing college affordability at community colleges. We also have done a couple postcard campaigns. So this was where we worked with student leaders such as yourself to get students to fill out postcards describing how college affordability challenges have impacted their ability to be successful. And we then delivered them with student leaders to legislative leadership. And actually what was really great was that Speaker Anthony Rendon authored an op-ed after he received a huge stack of postcards. And so really, I mean, I felt like that goes to show the impact of advocacy efforts like that, and he wrote in this op-ed, while the success stories of these students are very real, so are the struggles that so many other students face. Despite financial aid programs, many still struggle with costs associated with buying textbooks, affording transportation to school, and other day-to-day living expenses. So, and I'll also say that it's really been great to work in partnership with all three of the statewide student leadership groups, really kind of leveraging the strengths that we all have. There's also a lot of overlap. A lot of community college students will transfer to CSU and UC. I know a colleague of mine, Darla Cooper, gave a presentation earlier on the research that her group, the research and planning group, has done on the barriers to transfer for community college students. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to partner with all of the statewide student leadership organizations on issues like college affordability and transfer. This next slide is, let's see. Again, just another example of a postcard campaign that we had started at TICAS. And then, so in summary, we're looking for a system that works better primarily for students, but also for the state. If we can have a better structured program and one that's more efficient, like ultimately that will save the state money in the end. But as I said at the beginning of the presentation, all of the work that we do is firmly rooted in being student-centered. The challenges that our students today face, the affordability challenges, are a direct result of the ways in which the Cal Grant program has been underfunded. So those structural problems are very real, and that's really what led to efforts to reform the program. So while reform is certainly still needed, but of course it's complicated given COVID, it's also important to note that incremental reforms do add up too, and that there are steps that California can take now to protect students' access to financial aid amidst the pandemic. So, I already mentioned some of the provisions that we've been advocating for and we continue to advocate for, like not having, if you drop out due to COVID, not having that semester of Cal Grant count towards your lifetime limit because you only get 4 years of it. But there's some other ideas too. One of them is that not all of the competitive Cal Grants are awarded at the beginning of the academic year. And we'd really like to see a change that allows, basically there would need to be a change in statute that allows the California Student Aid Commission to over award. And we know that not every single person who's going to be offered a competitive or any kind of grant is going to actually take it. But of course, the Student Aid Commission has done really great work to try on the administrative side to recycle awards. If they offer it to a certain number of students, not all of them accept the award, then they will then offer it to a new batch of students. But really what's needed to allow them to over award and get all those awards out at the beginning of the year before students start, dropping out because they can't afford it, is we need legislation. So we need something that's going to fix the fact that right now there are still several thousand awards that don't get offered until the spring, when probably the lowest income students, unless they found some other finance method, may have dropped out. Just to throw out ideas, I'd mentioned perhaps having a centralized net price calculator where you could, go and say, here is the information here's my family's financial information. I'm curious about what are all the net costs after grant aid at Stanford, at Santa Monica College, at Laney College, at USC, and have it all pop up so you can compare them side by side. Certainly we need to be thinking more about, and I know a lot of us are, about remote learning infrastructure, which includes affordable and high quality broadband and computer access and technology access, increasing access to government safety net programs, including CalFresh or food stamps. And I know there's been ongoing work that we've been involved with to have a form that schools can provide students, that if you're if you can anticipate getting a work study job, that exempts you from it can be hard for students to get CalFresh if they're not working a certain number of hours, and we don't want those students to have to work those many hours, but there are certain exemptions. One of those exemptions is if you can anticipate a work study job. So an example of a creative way that people have been working together is, how can we get these work study forms, certification forms to students that then will make them eligible for CalFresh. But I really want to hear from you. I certainly am happy to do my best to answer any questions that you may have. But if you have additional ideas right now about ways that we can improve college affordability, other partnerships, I am all ears. So with that, I will stop talking and see if any of you have questions. But thank you so much for having me present today. Tony, I can't see, maybe I need to stop sharing my screen. I cannot see any questions. So maybe if I stop sharing, I will see it. Or maybe there are none. Let's see. Great. So someone had said, as COVID-19 has proven difficult financially for some students, what about access to the required textbooks that professors are asking of students to get? There are students who use financial aid to purchase those books or materials, but what happens when they are unable to because their financial aid has not come in, or it has a delayed arrival due to COVID-19? This is especially for the students who are taking those courses that may be 6 or 8 weeks. So, that's an excellent question. And these are, examples like these are things that I really need to hear, because it allows me to do a better job in terms of targeting the policy suggestions or policy ideas that we put forth. So first of all, I think it's an issue that financial aid has been delayed. I think part of the solution there is figuring out, why has it been delayed? Is it because the financial aid offices are overworked with not enough funds? Prior to COVID, we knew that for every $4 that UC financial aid offices got, community college ones only got $1. So what's the bottleneck that's happening there? And then also, what are other alternatives for students? So, can there be some sort of, can they have a credit with, or, a debit at the bookstore? Is there a way for people to kind of be given the books up front with the kind of understanding that students will then pay for it later? Are there enough books on reserve at the library? Well, I guess now you can't go to the library. So are there ways for students to be able to access it electronically? Those are just initial ideas that come to mind for that question. I welcome any feedback if people have other thoughts, but I will definitely make sure to note this particular concern, because I imagine it's happening to many people.
So we can go ahead and have a couple minutes if you are typing in the chat any questions, or if you want to raise your hand, or put questions through the app. We can leave it open for a couple minutes.
And really, I'll just keep saying it again, because I can't say it enough. If you or any of your colleagues or peers have stories that you're comfortable sharing about how the pandemic and recession has impacted you as a student, please do reach out to me. I will put my email in the chat right here, because I know that I stopped sharing my screen. Oh, That's my personal email. You're welcome to use it. I just did it out of habit. Here's my work one. Either one is fine. But yeah, I mean, I think that, we all know, we as student leaders, as researchers, we all know the real struggles that our students are facing. Lord knows, with basic needs and security already as bad as it was before the pandemic, it's only worse now, but we really need to get these stories to the administration. Okay, question. How can ASOs best support their students, i.e. financially or legislatively, during this time? Another great question. I think that, a couple different things. One is maybe surveying your student body and getting a sense of what are the challenges that they're facing. So, as the participant above was talking about access to required textbooks, like finding out what are the issues like that your students are facing. Then, partnering with organizations like TICAS, where I work, with other with the SSCCC to think about, okay, what's a proposed policy solution that we can come up with? Coalition building is really important. So if you can get other organizations on board to advocate with you and you can join forces, that can be incredibly helpful. So I would start there. A follow-up question to that first question, how will students be affected when it comes down to classes? There might be students who are relying on financial aid to pay for classes, but due to the drop period for college for class enrollment, then what? Is it that these students now have to wait to have the money to take the class and then the wait for the class to once again be available? So I want to make sure I understand this question. Is the question that people are not, they're enrolling, but then the classes aren't happening, so they're not getting the money? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I entirely understand the question. I don't know if the person who wrote it wants to say. I'm happy to turn it over to whoever wants to clarify.
Let me see. All right, and Jen, I just unmuted you, so if you want to talk, you can.
I can. Thank you so much, Tony. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for answering my first question. So
no problem.
The question, yeah. So the second question I had kind of goes hand in hand with that first question. So students, like I said before, are relying on financial aid to pay for their classes as they are for materials. So with COVID-19 having its, let me rephrase that, posing some financial difficulty for students as they may not be able to receive the payment on time for certain classes, as some classes have this 2-week period of dropping and re-enrolling students. Now, there's a thing where you have to pay right away. I'm not sure if this goes for all the colleges, but at least it's something that I see present at Sac City. How is it that we can make sure that these students can be able to take the class, but yet not have to worry too much about the financial aspect of it, at least if that makes sense? I hope I'm making sense.
So is the issue that like the fee waiver isn't coming through? The money that actually pays for the class, like the class itself, tuition isn't coming through?
I'm sorry, you cut out for a second.
Oh, is the issue that the money that pays the tuition for those classes is not coming through?
That's what I've heard from some students, given the time of the pandemic, and it's really unfortunate to hear that, especially as I've heard some cases being that these are students who are getting ready to graduate, and now they can no longer graduate because they weren't able to pay for this course and they weren't able to take the course, therefore it sets them back.
So in other words, I'm so sorry if I'm being really dense here, but I just want to make sure.
It's okay.
So someone's enrolled in a biology class. Mm-hmm. They are expecting a fee waiver, or the promise grant as it's now called. For some reason, that fee waiver promise grant doesn't make it to them in time, so they're dropped from the class.
Yes.
Okay. That's terrible. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, That's obviously a problem. I'd want to learn more about why that is. You know, I wonder, you know, there was a lot of challenges. I mean, I'm not saying this to excuse anything, but there were a lot of challenges that schools were facing when they were just slammed with the pandemic and they, you know, didn't have certain policies in place. So I don't know if it was just a matter of like something in the bureaucracy that got dropped that has now been resolved. Have you heard of this happening this fall? I think you're muted. Or maybe my internet keeps going in and out. Maybe it's me.
Which presenter? Which?
Jen.
Okay, hold on. I'll unmute her.
I was just about to type my answer in the chat, but unfortunately, I heard about 1 or 2 stories over this semester, and then I heard a lot more stories occurring over the summer. I can't give you an exact number of how many times it happened over the summer.
Yeah.
But it was really unfortunate to hear that for so many students.
Oh yeah,
so
totally.
I'm just here to speak on behalf of all those students because that is a serious concern, and I truly do feel for those students. So the question I'm just simply trying to pose is, what can we do to help these students and prevent future instances of that happening?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things. I mean, I think, you know, letting the chancellor's office know that this has happened, letting organizations like advocacy organizations like ours know, because now that it's on my radar, I want to do some digging into it. Go asking the financial aid office what happened. You know, is it something about that particular student? Like there could be so many different reasons. It could be a bureaucratic issue or crossed wires because there's new policies people are putting in place with COVID and things aren't going smoothly. It could be that someone had submitted a FAFSA prior to the pandemic and recession, and they didn't have financial need at that point, but then they lost a job. And so maybe they need to have a professional judgment. They need to go in and have the financial aid office run, they call it PJ, professional judgment, and update their economic situation so that they're now eligible. So that's a possibility of something that could have happened too. But if if you want to email me, I'd be happy to talk more about it too. Unfortunately, I don't have any kind of better ideas at the moment, but I think it's something that's really important to look into.
I will send you an email right away after the session.
Awesome.
All right, we have 2 minutes left for questions. You can either raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can type it in the chat.
I just also want to thank all of you for the great work you do. I know that on top of class, I mean, you have classes. Now you have classes that you're trying to do remotely. Many of you have families and jobs and many responsibilities. And so I just am very impressed with your dedication, and we'll just, want to be as helpful as possible. So really, please reach out to me. And if anyone here is interested, I don't think that registration is unlimited. I think there's a certain number, a cap that we can have, but if any of you are interested in that virtual convening that we're having in a couple weeks, certainly we would like students to attend. So please email me and I can register you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any in the chat or the app at this time. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we can probably close up right now. Thank you everyone for calling in, and thank you, Laura, for joining us at the
My
professional.
pleasure.
And if you have any questions, you can email her. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, have a lovely weekend, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.